Day, April 27th. If you please rise. Neil, if you'll lead us, please. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay. Roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Here.
Director Andrews?
Here.
Director Bennett?
Here.
Director West?
Here.
Director Borchert?
Here. I see Andy Waters, Bob Aranio. Those are the only two alternates I see in the audience. Okay. Agenda review, Tully?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. Hence, there's nothing to approve. It is what it is. Public comments, opportunity of the board to address the GMA on non-agenda items. Anybody? Okay, board member comments, opportunity of the board. Any members? Okay. We have a consent agenda, 2 items on the consent agenda, some minutes to be approved. A motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Okay. We're at item 3, status update on the advanced metering infrastructure, AMI.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart, members of the board. I'm Andrew Sheldon. I'm the new groundwater manager for the Watershed Protection District. I'm going to introduce this item. The item's on automated metering infrastructure, and the subject was last heard by this board on August 13th, 2015, when staff presented a proof of concept idea for the board to consider. And the board did ask staff to come back with implementation of the proof of concept project, which was implemented on 20 agricultural wells with automated meters. And today, Alma from our staff, who's also new to agency staff, will be presenting the results of the proof of concept project, along with a technical presentation from Trimble Water, who is a technology vendor that assisted with implementation of the project. And then following the proof of concept item, item 4 will be on board consideration of possible implementation of this technology throughout the agency.
Okay.
I'm going to hand it over to Alma now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Alma Quezada with the County of Ventura Watershed Protection District. I will be presenting item 3, the status update on an AMI proof of concept program. On August 13, 2015, staff presented the board with a proof of concept program for an advanced metering infrastructure network being developed by various companies and led by Semtech. Staff was directed to assist with the proof of concept program, including the installation of AMI technology on up to 20 agricultural extraction facilities. Staff initiated the process by requesting volunteers to participate in the program. 20 potential proof of concept well sites were identified, and the final list was then limited to 9 wells due to ease of retrofitting and geographic location to cover a broad area within the agency. Semtech collaborated with the volunteers to begin retrofitting the wells with AMI technology at no cost to the FCGMA. Installations were completed on February 23, 2016, thereby initiating the proof of concept phase. The meters are spatially distributed to cover a broad area of the agency. The long range and low power capabilities are being tested and they appear to be working. Extraction data is currently transmitted to a remote server hosted by Telog Instruments, which is a subsidiary of Trimble Navigation. Trimble is a technology vendor that assisted with the proof of concept project, and they will now be presenting more information about AMI technology and how it can be applied. And coming up is Marcus McCarthy of Trimble Navigation.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. As is only fitting in a presentation about technology, we're starting with a bit of a problem with the presentation using technology, but we'll keep going. So I'm going to run through a couple of topics today. I'm going to introduce you to Trimble Water. That's one slide. I won't dwell on it too long. I'm going to talk a small little bit about the technology, about the proof of concept that we completed, what may be possible with that proof of concept going forward, and some suggestions or recommendations. So Trimble Water is a division of Trimble Navigation, which is a NASDAQ-quoted corporation, about 8,000 people, a little bit more than that. We leverage Trimble technology. Trimble is a very broad technology company. A lot of people would be familiar with it. We develop new technology and we acquire solutions to create solutions for our customers in the marketplace. We see partnership as key part of our approach in the marketplace. It's partnership with our customers and partnership with people like the GMA. And that's why we're interested in doing proof of concepts like this. So very briefly, AMI, or Advanced Metering Infrastructure, is an application of a technology that's been used for over 20 years. And it's a type of remote monitoring where you have a sensor in the field, and in this case the sensor is the meter, which is monitoring how much water is being used. You're connecting that to a telemetry unit, and you're using new communication technologies to bring the data back to computer servers where people can do work with that data. And it's as I say, we've been doing this in the marketplace for over 20 years. We commonly do it in water distribution at all stages of the distribution network, and wastewater, stormwater as well. So we have a long history of doing this type of remote monitoring of water. So the proof of concept was really to prove that it would work in this area and to show people how it does work. There were 3 companies involved in pulling the proof of concept together. Semtech, which is a local company, the owners of the IP on the communication technology. Senate provided the network. And I'd like to thank those 2 companies for putting up the 2 towers that they did put up. That was an investment of approximately $50,000 on their part to complete this proof of concept. So it's a significant contribution. We provided the remote telemetry units and the software expertise on the back end to pull the data in and analyze it and make sure that it was usable and understandable data. So the communications technology we used in this trial is relatively new. It's in use maybe around 2 years around the world, but it's in significant use in California. There's tens of thousands of sensors out there, and over 50 base stations gathering data. So it is a proven technology and a proven reliable technology. The advantages of this approach really are being able to communicate over very long distances using low power. So you can use a battery-operated unit, and you can report very, very frequently as well. And so there are a lot of benefits in being able to do that for the GMA in terms of understanding how much water is being taken from the basin and when it is being taken. So this is the trial as was set up. In red, you can see the 3 base stations, and those are basically like antennae that get communicated to by the meters, and you can see the locations of the different meters, as Alma pointed out earlier on. And so we have a measurement of the distance between the meter and the antenna here as well, and you can see the 2 of them were over 12 miles. This technology can work reliably in the open over 40 miles distance. In an urban area, it works up to 2 miles, and in a mixed area, generally 15. So there's a high degree of reliability, and that's why it's suitable technology for use here. So we can see some of the data that we...
Let me, if I may,
Sure,
back up a slide. The proof of concept showed that those antennas picked up the full boundary, essentially the full boundary of the GMA. Ultimately, there will be additional antennas to be able to have the amount of information?
No, it's really related to reaching into specific canyons, as I understand
okay.
it. So it's not just distance; it's also obstacles. So if you have an obstacle of sufficient density, it attenuates or shortens the communication distance. So this is all about getting reach into individual canyons. But one of the things we would do if you decide to go forward with this, is we would do what's called a radio propagation plan, and we would do analysis of the minimum number of stations that would be needed to gather this data.
Okay.
So we can see some of the data that was gathered. These are the 9 meters, and this is the total acre foot. It's not coming up well on the slide, but this is the total acre foot used by each meter. Along here we can see daily usage, and this is each one of these bars in this graph is acre feet per hour that were used. So you can see per hour what was used at this pump site from this meter. And here we see battery information. And this is coming towards the end of the trial. It was on the 20th of April we took these measurements. And this is after 20,000 reads, and the battery is still, it's a 3.6 volt battery, and it's still at 3.6 volts after doing 20,000 communications. And that's one of the real benefits of this technology, is that you can run, we're saying you can run this for 5 years on a single 3.6 volt battery. We actually expect you're going to get a lot longer than that. We had one instance during the trial where we had problems. It was 5 o'clock in the morning on March 7th. 3 of the units stopped communicating. We went back and looked at all the data, and it turned out that there was very high gusts of wind, up to 60 miles an hour, exactly at that point in time. And you can see how some of the units were mounted to get good radio signal. So on top of a temporary setup, it is a proof of concept rather than a permanent installation. We suspect that what happened was the battery disconnected, and when it connected again, the units didn't reconnect with the base stations. We changed the software on the units remotely, and that hasn't happened again. So the way the software works now, it will automatically reconnect, so there wouldn't be any gap in the data. So going forward, the ability to have this data throws up a lot of capability to understand what's happening in the basin, how much water is being taken, how fast they are refilling, and to understand all sorts of data which would optimize the management of groundwater here. Again, one of the things we would suggest going forward is that we develop a mobile app, and we have this app pretty much out of the box for the growers, and they would be able to see how much water is coming from an individual well or from all of their wells, and if they were working to a target, they would be able to measure it against that target as well. And that app would be a mobile phone-based app that would give them access to the data from their wells. In future, there's a lot of other sensors that can be added to this network that would be of benefit in a lot of different ways going forward. So this enables a lot of precision farming and gathering of data and improvement of processes.
Could you go back one, please?
Sure.
You have the very first one, the aquifer level and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pressure in the aquifer that
There
could be
is
measured
there is
also?
pressure to be measured in the aquifer as well. Yes.
Great, thank you.
And some of the benefit of that, for instance, just by making it real, is that we have found in other locations that where 2 pumps are pumping and they're close to each other, they increase the wellhead pressure. So they're in effect pumping against each other. And so by scheduling the pumps not to be operating at the same time, you can save energy, you can save pumping time, and you can do a lot of things like that. So the wear and tear on the machinery is less, the pumps last longer. So there's a lot of benefits. Again, without the data, you can't begin to understand what's really happening under the ground in the aquifer.
Right. Thank you.
So some suggestions going forward, if you are going to go forward, is that we build out some additional base stations to give more coverage of the area. And again, it goes back to your question earlier on, Chairman Mulhard. We would like to specify 2 or 3 meters and certify them for use in the area, certify installers to set up a solution like this. We would ask for some volunteer growers to become involved in specifying what the mobile app for the growers should look like, and what data they would like to see on that, what alarms they would like to see on it. Establish a deadline for enabling wells in specific areas, incentivize participation with rebates for on-time installation, and then allow the growers to choose and negotiate with the installer meter that suits them going forward. So just some suggestions from the programme. I'll hand back to Alma now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, anybody have any questions?
Yes,
Board?
I do.
The board as well?
There was a host of other possibilities of sensors and whatnot that were capable. They all transmit over the same network, correct?
Yes.
And how are those services provided to the growers individually? Is that a fee service over the network, or how does that work?
For the additional sensors going
Correct,
forward?
like soil moisture sensors,
Okay,
for example.
so interesting. So the fee that we have negotiated with Senate is 75 cents per device per month. So that's the kind of range that you would be looking at to do that. And that's with, we were doing communications every 5 minutes for the 3 months, and it's 75 cents per device per month.
Amazing.
So if you compare that with cellular, and we've spent 20 years using cellular technology and radio technologies to do communication. Your cellular technology, and most people know this, is going to cost you per megabyte. And if you did the type of monitoring we just did for the last 3 months, you'd be into $20, $30 a month per device. So that's why this new technology changes.
Per device or per sensor, right?
Per sensor, per
Yeah,
device in
okay,
the ground,
yeah.
yeah. It
So
changes the economics of
Yeah,
doing this type of
scaling it up to
monitoring.
do certain things that growers would want and whatnot changes it.
Absolutely. It becomes a lot more expensive using older technology. That's why this new technology makes a lot more sense.
And Senate would provide that monthly service to whoever wanted to sign up for it.
Yes.
So the only cost at that point would be the cost of the sensor getting that in. And typically a sensor has a life of 5 years, 10 years?
5 to 10 years. It depends on the sensor. It depends on how you're deploying it. But the battery life using this type of communication technology, even if you're doing measurements every 10 or 15 minutes, is 5 to 10 years.
Okay. We have a question. Yeah, Daryl, you got to come up. You got to tell us who you are. We don't know.
My name is Daryl Smith. I'm a grower, and I have a Centex meter, and it's a mag meter. My question is, I know how much it's going to cost a month to monitor it, but what is it going to cost to install your sensor, and how complicated is that?
So we've looked at the meters in the area here, and some of the meters that are more modern will require replacement of what's called the meter register and the addition of an RTU. The list price of that today is about $1,300. The older meters are not capable of being retrofitted like that and would need to be replaced. And in that case, it very much depends. There's a range of meters available and the RTU unit. And I would say that the range of prices range from probably $2,000 to $4,000. Each site is different, that's what it is, and the requirements are slightly different. So there is an expense at each site in terms of installing meters.
Okay. All right. I see Bob coming up. We're just for everybody's benefit, we're going to go into this next item, which is a continuation of this. So,
Robert Aranio here on behalf of Crestview Mutual. My question is the instrumentation that is on there, is it only passive, or are we able to set alarms and then have that activate a piece of equipment in response to a known condition that's being returned to us?
Okay. So the way they are passive, but when the data is coming back that frequently, what you can do is have the alarming done from the point where the data is collected. So when you're getting data back every 5 or 10 minutes, take, for example, one scenario where a pump has been operating between these hours every day for the past 5 days or 10 days, and then it doesn't start on a particular day, so you're not getting any water provided for irrigation. The computer system is such that it can look at it and say there's a pattern of use here which has changed, and it can throw an alarm on the mobile app for the grower to say, is this okay, yes or no? So the designing of what those alarms should be and what analysis of the data needs to be done to throw the alarm is the reason for getting 3 growers involved in specifying the features of that software.
okay, all right. Okay, where did Alma go there? Thank you. Please. Thank you.
So just to conclude, the proof of concept phase has demonstrated that AMI technology works and is reliable. Initial minor problems have been corrected and are not anticipated to recur. AMI technology can be used to monitor a multitude of parameters with a computer or even a cell phone. Staff believes AMI is capable of supporting sustainable groundwater management and advanced irrigation practices if implemented.
Questions? Well, first time we see a little character in the question mark there. Technology has just gone nuts. Any members have any questions? Anybody in the audience? Staff has said, item 2, hear a presentation. Item 2, direct staff on how to proceed with the AMI program. I'm wondering, Tully, if the answer to that statement on how to proceed, we need to talk about item 4 so that they're kind of in concert. Otherwise, we're basically assuming things that really are important in item 4. That's really about the...
Absolutely.
Okay. Are you guys okay with that? So we reserve the right to come back and direct staff on item 3, but we need to hear about item 4, and the audience needs to hear about item 4, because I think it leads to where we direct staff in item 3. Okay? So let's go to, if everybody's okay, let's go to item 4.
It's not advancing.
There we go.
Okay, once again, for the record, my name is Alma Quezada with the Watershed Protection District, and I'm going to be presenting item 4, the recommendation to implement an advanced metering infrastructure on active and inactive wells. A request to implement automatic meters on groundwater wells was presented to your board in 2011. The previous smart meter proposal utilized a cellular network for communication between the meter and the receiving device. Automatic metering never materialized despite the availability of state funding to offset the cost. Your board unanimously agreed that smart metering may not be the best approach due to the required cost and staff time, and because the agency had made great strides in an online self-reporting groundwater extraction system that is currently in use. 5 years have passed since any smart metering proposals have been brought to the board. Automatic metering technology has changed, and smart metering systems are being adopted by more utility companies and private industry. Current drought conditions and population growth have sharpened the focus on water resources. Environmental groups and government bodies are taking a closer look at the use and management of the state's water resources. On January 1st, 2015, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, became effective, thus beginning a new era in groundwater management in California. Under SGMA, GSPs must be developed, adopted, and implemented for all medium and high priority basins. All basins underlying the FCGMA boundaries are designated as high or medium priority by the DWR. In January of this year, the DWR also confirmed that the Oxnard and the Pleasant Valley basins are critically overdrafted basins. Biannual groundwater extractions are required by ordinance for all well owners and operators. Flow meters are read and recorded by the owner or operator, and some errors may creep into the reporting of groundwater extraction data. All agricultural well operators are required by emergency ordinance to report water use relative to an irrigation allowance index, or IAI. IAI is dependent on correct meter readings. Unreported groundwater extractions cannot be quantified, and staff time required to correct the errors and obtain data from non-reporters is time-consuming. The groundwater extraction reporting process could be improved with the implementation of AMI technology. AMI enables two-way communication between the well meter and a receiving device, which allows an entire groundwater well network to be monitored. Potential benefits associated with converting to an AMI system include the ability to detect reverse flow and leaks, improved water resource management, a reduction in staff time spent on processing extraction reports, a reduction or even elimination of the administrative burden for growers to report extraction data, increased accuracy of the reported data, the opportunity for growers to implement advanced irrigation practices, and the potential to facilitate GSP implementation and water market transactions. Some of the potential limitations identified with AMI implementation include a large upfront investment, especially if a complete meter replacement is required. Manual readings may still be required on some wells due to topography, but we anticipate those to be fewer than 1%. Accounting of individual water usage of shared wells was also identified as a potential limitation, as was theft or vandalism and simply flow meter bypassing. AMI technology can be a valuable tool for improving the management of groundwater extractions, conservation, and increasing irrigation efficiencies, thus reducing vulnerability to drought and other water supply constraints. At this time, it is not known how AMI implementation will be funded. Staff is exploring options to secure state funding, to secure funding through state grant programs. Some of the funding options may include owner funding, agency funding, state funding, or any combination of the above. Implementing AMI would also require a new ordinance and resolution. The draft ordinance is presented in the agenda package and available for viewing on the agency website. A workshop is also scheduled for all stakeholders and interested parties wishing to comment on the draft ordinance. I also placed informational flyers on the workshop near the sign-in sheet as you enter the boardroom. So those are available for anyone wishing to pick up the flyer and sign up for the workshop.
Okay.
So in summary, AMI technology can be readily implemented in the FCGMA. Accurate reporting of groundwater extractions is an essential element to effective groundwater management. The technology is anticipated to facilitate sustainable groundwater management and advanced irrigation practices. Staff recommends AMI implementation agency-wide for all active and inactive wells.
Okay, questions? Yes, Dave.
Has staff thought about who assumes maintenance responsibility for the automatic meters? For example, a battery goes out. You guys would probably find that out through the communication. Who's responsible for the maintenance and
That's a
sustain
really
the
good
system?
question, and we don't know that, but that's an item that can be brought up at the workshop.
Just looking at the system that's on my well, one of the test wells, the battery is not in the meter. The battery is in the little transmitter, and it's no different than all kinds of other things. I think you took a screwdriver and took the head off and put the battery in, or played with the battery and put it all back together. So it's about a 5-minute exercise. And if I recall, it wasn't a 9, it was a special battery or a 9D cell?
It's an alkaline battery. It's the technology within the battery itself is slightly different.
Okay. But the actual mechanism for replacing the battery is very straightforward.
Obviously, the battery is the least of the concern. I mean, that's a simple, kind of no-brainer issue, but I was thinking more in regards to the meter itself. It appears, it seemed to me as reading through the packet that we'll have to have some staff available to troubleshoot and do some maintenance on the system to keep it reporting and operating properly.
Well, again, just my experience, again, as one of them, the meter, when they took, I have a digital micrometer meter, and that digital micrometer meter head is all that was replaced. It looked exactly like the one I currently have, except it had a port that allowed a cable to go to the transmitter. So the question then is, if the digital meter that I have, micrometer, and it faulted, I would cover that expense because it would be my expense. The only thing, as I understand it, that meter is doing is has pickups within the meter that send it to the transmitter. Am I safe in saying that?
Absolutely. And that's the reason we suggested that we certify the local installers to put in the meter and the telemetry in. And then if there's a problem, they're the ones who will be responsible for fixing it. It's no different from things really happen today.
So my argument or my comment to you, Dave, would be that the current meters that we have on the wells today, if something goes wrong with that meter, discovered either by the grower or in the calibration testing that has to be done, it's the grower's expense the way it is now, and it has happened. I've had to replace my meter because it failed a calibration test. And I don't think that the telemetry they're adding to that changes necessarily that. So I'm not sure that the maintenance issue is as big as we may theoretically make it, because when I looked at the system, it's basically a plug inside, the head looks the same, but it has certain pickups and a cable that goes up to a pole, and on that pole is a little box. It's about that size with an antenna on it. That's really, I was shocked on how simplistic it was. Now, I'm not trying to take you off your question, but I just want you to understand, for folks in the audience, having seen the system work on our well, it's pretty straightforward.
No, I have similar technology in the field with soil sensors and whatnot, and it is relatively straightforward. And typically our experience has been when the circuit boards in those units go bad, the circuit board just needs replacing. Even that's relatively simple. Mm-hmm. It's just what your thought process is that becomes the meter owner's responsibility, that additional equipment.
Well, my thought would be, well, I haven't really thought about it in those terms, but the meter itself is no different than what we currently
Understood.
have. The actual telemetry box, if there is a circuit board that goes out in that, there's got to be, we'll have to build it into the discussion, some 800 number you call, and somebody ships you a new, I would assume ship you a new box. I think when you put it in, they connected the wires, and I think there was 3 connections and thumb screws or whatever it was, and they put it back into play. And then it had to go through a calibration process and talk to the home base to make sure the home base now understood the coding that was coming out. That's the only thing. But my understanding, and they did it while I was there, is they were able to talk to their office, and their office was able to reprogram the box in real time, remotely, and say, okay, I'm now seeing the box, it should be working fine, and sure enough, it was working fine.
Very good.
The audience have any questions?
Afternoon, Jared Bouchard, General Manager at the Channel Islands Beach. My question, I guess, kind of goes to the discussion you're having is what the intent is. Both presentations focused on the benefits to the ag community and getting that reporting data back. But when I read through the proposed ordinance, it seems like it will apply to everybody. And much of what you're discussing, most of the M&I community, we're doing these things today as it is. So I guess my question is, the way the ordinance is written today says it's going to apply to any extractor, and will we all anticipate the need to install a telemetry system that will communicate with whatever the proposed communication system with the GMA is?
Okay. I don't have the answer to that. What I'm looking at in this staff recommendation is staff is basically saying we want to have a workshop so we can get a laundry list of all these questions either submitted in advance or come up out of the workshop like we've done in the past that generates questions that the suppliers with the technology will be able to address that very issue. How does their system tie into an existing system so that we get that data? So I don't see us adopting, well, I'm not sure if that's a true statement. We're not adopting a resolution per se. It's a draft. We're setting up a workshop that will get into the weeds on a lot of these issues. And I think the question before the board is, do we want to set up that workshop? Do we want to put forward this proposed draft ordinance that's in front of us as a starting point, as we've done in the past? We've done this before where we've put proposed wording in place, and out of the workshops and public comments and the different entities that are working their way through these issues will have a chance to weigh in on these kinds of articles within this ordinance change, and I'm sure the question you just raised will come up in that as well. I hope it would. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Alma, what is staff's thinking with respect to the opt-out provision in Article 7? Why is that in there, assuming it doesn't apply to somebody who has, topographical restrictions?
Al, any thoughts on it?
Well, part of the thinking behind that was the potential for resistance to the idea of having remote monitoring installed. Keeping in mind that these wells are all located, except with regard to the public operators, on private property. The agency does not own any of these facilities, and so in that sense we're dependent on the cooperation of operators to participate in the AMI program. And for those who object strongly enough to it, we would provide this alternative that if you don't want to allow us real-time access to your well operation, that increased manual reporting would be required by those operators.
I guess that's one alternative. But thank you. No, I understand.
Bob.
With regards to item 7, paragraph number 7, and what we're talking about, I would encourage it to be left in place. As an M&I operator, we're already doing daily reads on our wellheads already, and we already are tracking that. So for me, at the end of the month, in order to email over what is my log for my facilities, that's easy. And it's a way in order to reduce any cost to the GMA. It's already generated, it's already there, and I don't have to worry about potential conflicts with my existing SCADA system and what I'm already doing with the data from my wellhead. I'm already collecting it for every single district, every single day. There's a monkey that goes out and writes it down, and then we translate it into digital format. So it's easy for me to turn that over to you.
A monkey?
A monkey.
Operator.
Oh, Somebody, I see somebody doing, oh, I thought they were doing gymnastics. Okay.
Any more questions?
I think what we have before us is a question. The recommendations: provide direction to staff regarding bringing this matter to the May 25th GMA board meeting to include proposal for an AMI system implementation and a new ordinance code to authorize AMI usage. Staff is proposing a workshop as part of their outreach progress. I'm looking at page 3 of 4 in their write-up. A workshop is tentatively scheduled for May 25th, 2016, 24th, for all stakeholders and interested parties. So the series of questions would be: should we have a workshop? Should we have this on the agenda for May 25th, the proposal for an implementation and a new ordinance code? And as we've done in the past, we may get input that requires us to delay that or change that. I mean, we've done that before. That's no surprise. But do we put this ball in play? That, to me, are the fundamental questions before us. Steve?
I'd move that. I'd move that action, and that is that we go forward with staff's recommendations regarding May 25th, 2016 workshop with the draft ordinance that is out there. I'd make this comment as I make the motion, and that is I think we've done some good due diligence. We've done a proof of concept of this. This is a very transparent process that the staff has set up, and I don't think there's any question that we all know we need to go this way and get this done, and that we have a lot of other big fish that we have to fry, and we ought to get this sort of settled and over with. And so I don't think there's any way you go to water. You can even have good, healthy discussions of water markets and real sustainability without having real confidence in the data that you have. This gives us that data. It does it in as cost-effective way as possible. It will be a cost of doing business. So there will be quite a bit of cost of doing business. So the other thing I'd add is direct staff to move forward with all deliberate speed so that we can get on to the other more challenging things that we're going to have to deal with.
Okay. And you've made that as a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one concern.
Okay.
And that is that between the 24th and the 20th, that's one day for the staff to summarize the outcome of that workshop. I think that's a problem, but that's the only concern I have. Otherwise, I agree with Director Bennett.
I'll second the motion.
That was my comment as well.
Okay. So I have a motion.
Workshop on the 24th,
Okay.
meeting on the 25th.
All right, this is odd. Just as you were speaking, Jeanette got up, so I've got a motion and a second, and we have.
Could I just address one thing before we change topic, and that is certainly if at the 24th something comes up that makes us feel like staff can't handle it by the 25th, we could address it at that point in time. But by having it like this, it does allow us to move forward with all deliberate speed so that we can focus on sustainability numbers and those other things. Thank you.
Let me hear from Jeanette real quick.
Jeanette Lombardo, California Food and Agribusiness Advocate. 2 points. One you just brought up is I don't think it's enough time. The second is also on that day, United has their budget workshop. So if we're going to schedule something, make sure they're not at the same time would be appreciated. I believe it's United meeting starts at 8.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at Mauricio sitting in the back there. Mauricio's nodding his head. Ooh, I heard that message. Let me comment on this issue of the 24th and 25th. The 24th is a workshop. Anything that comes out of that workshop is not binding. It has to go through the staff, and the only way we as a board can go through the public process of trying to narrow the issues down is to hear it. So I'm not afraid to hear the issue the next day, and as we've done in the past, if there's so much pushback or so much work that has to be done on the issue, I think staff is smart enough, they know how we operate as a board, and I think we've operated this way in the past, that if we have to delay it to some other subsequent date after we make some direction and
findings, if you want. So I think the sequence is workable because it is a workshop to a board meeting for direction, and we're not mandated to take action. It's not a second reading. It is, in fact, a chance for us to move the ball down the court, as Steve suggested. All right? You okay with that?
I'm just going to say that in the recommendations in the very first paragraph, we are talking about bringing this matter to the board May 25th, including the proposal for the implementation and a new ordinance to authorize its use. So, once again, if that's the case, we're going to be looking at a new ordinance in one day of comments. Doesn't seem very appropriate.
I think the way we've done this in the past is we don't have to follow staff's recommendation on the 25th. If what we hear at the workshop and the audience will speak up clearly on the 25th, we're not ready to go, we have taken a pause in the past. I believe we could do that again. If they go through the workshop and staff massages it and gets feedback prior to the workshop and finds out that this, in fact, is what we want to do, and we have the ability on the 25th to actually move forward if that's available. But I don't feel bound just because staff says they want it on the 25th. I don't feel bound to give them that unless it meets our criteria. And the criteria is going to be defined a lot by the input we get from the public on the 24th.
Chairman Mulhart, if I could, I'd just like to word it this way, and that is that by taking this action, it gives us the option to go forward on May 25th, but doesn't obligate us to go forward. But if we do have agreement that we've got a good ordinance here and stuff on the 24th, by giving ourselves the option to go forward, we then preserve that up. If we don't schedule it that way, we don't have that option, and we have that much more built into it. We can always slow down, but you can't speed up if you don't agendize the item. Thank you.
All right.
That logic doesn't follow for me. You're either going to have an ordinance that's based on comments and something that's built on a process, or you're not. And I agree with you, Chairman Mulhart. We can decide to take a step back, but if we are to follow the recommendations as listed here in the packet, this process doesn't seem proper.
Okay.
I'm all for moving forward on the program. I'm not against the AMI. I'm for moving forward on the process. What I'm not supporting so much is this concept that potentially we may look at a new ordinance on the 25th after less than 1 day of comments.
Could I just suggest a potential? Let's say we have the comments and we're down to a one-sentence change. We may say, hey, we had the comments and there was really only one area and a one-sentence change, and everybody in the room said, hey, it feels good. This gives us that option. I'm not saying that is what's going to happen or that it locks us in, but if we're down to where there is general agreement, I don't know why we would not want to have the option to go forward if we do have that agreement at the end of the workshop on the 24th.
I foresee one major instance that, for example, Al just mentioned to us that the agency doesn't own the devices, doesn't own the facilities. There's discussion at this meeting that we may pursue grant funding to help install the devices. If in fact the agency owns the devices, that kind of clears up the question of whether we have access to properties or not, access to those meters. So this doesn't seem to be a simple matter to me. It seems to be something that's going to have to get fleshed out in more than one meeting. I'm for the process, I'm for the automatic metering, but I don't like this idea of possibly voting on a new ordinance with very little input.
I think that the way the recommendation is written, I think the way it has a workshop, it's a chance for this information to come back to us on the 25th, for us to sort it out. If it's not right, the history of this agency is we don't pass it. I just don't see us being so stupid as to pass something that folks obviously had problems with and were not right. If it is right, we have the chance to go forward. This whole issue of the AMI has been before us for a long period of time. That's why we got into the proof of concept. And having a requirement to do this puts us in the ability to apply for the grant funding and get that process started and figure out how we're going to pay for these things. And the issue of the AMI has been put in front of, I think, a couple of grower groups, as I understand it. It's one of the key tenets, I believe, of the market program. We better have accurate data if we're going to try to do any selling or trading. So it's clear we need it. You've said that. I agree with that. I don't see the risk of passing something that is not right on the 25th. That's not what we've done in the past. In my umpteen years in this board, we haven't done that if it's not right after going through a bunch of iterations. Is everybody going to be happy with everything we do? No, it's never happened, and it goes with part of the territory. So what we have before us right now is a motion as modified by, you had changed the motion just as slightly or something?
No, I didn't really. I added some comments in support of the motion, but.
Okay. And who seconded it? Are you okay still with the second?
Yes.
Okay.
So could we repeat the motion, because we had a lot of conversation?
Yeah, my recommendation is that we move forward with staff's recommendation to hold a workshop and to schedule the hearing on May 25th, using the draft ordinance as the initial template.
Okay. That's the motion and a second. A roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchers?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to thanks. Thanks for all the work. Okay. All right. Let's go to item number 5.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 5. City of Oxnard Great Program Proposed Aquifer Storage and Recovery Pilot Program, or project. As some background for you, before introducing the guest speaker, I would have copied a page from the Environmental Impact Report for the Great Project. There was an aquifer storage and recovery program as part of that great project. And I have added some notes onto that figure taken from the Environmental Impact Report. The ASR project described in that report includes a pilot well, which is located near Port Hueneme, in the Oxnard Plain. So this is the Oxnard Plain. You can see the Camarillo Airport, the Oxnard Airport, the 101 freeway up there, Pacific Ocean. So the ASR pilot well was to be located near Port Hueneme, and that project included a series of injection wells that would be serving as a seawater intrusion barrier. The project being discussed today is actually an ASR project up near the east end of the Oxnard Airport. So that there's no confusion, this project is not being discussed today, and I believe that's been pulled, and they're talking about an alternate ASR project. And with that, I would like to introduce Curtis Hopkins, representing the City of Oxnard.
Can you hear me up in the booth? Can you change the slides to, there we go, it's happening. It's like on the airplane when the captain makes a PA to all you folks in the back. You all sit down so nicely. It's amazing, right? not.
Chairman Mulhart, directors of the board, Curtis Hopkins, I've been asked to provide an update to the GREAT program, and in particular, the proposed groundwater replenishment reuse program utilizing highly purified recycled water. The status of the project is that a new site was located. In this particular site's on city property with far less complications to the old site, which was near the old landfill, the city landfill. A preliminary Title 22 report and report of waste discharge applications have been submitted to the State Water Resources Control Board, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And the advanced water purification facility is presently operating and delivering water for irrigation purposes. In addition to that, the city did receive a grant that awarded monies for construction of an ASR demonstration well. The new site is located, as Kathleen indicated, on the east end of the Oxnard Airport. It's the location, the previous location of Oxnard High School. The site is slated to be developed by the city as a park at the present time. There are no plans accepted by City Council, so it's somewhat of an undeveloped site. And so what we have done is, working with Parks Department, located the ASR well right behind the gymnasium, and then the other 3 dots around the periphery of the site. There we go. 1, 2, and 3 are monitoring well locations. The figure on the right shows the hatched area, which is actually, when they expanded the airport runway, this is the airspace restricted area. So we went through channels and, if you would, have located wells that we could get permitted through the FAA. In this case, the proposed project would, for the long term, would include potentially 3 ASR locations that would be completed in different aquifer zones so they could operate independently without interference, and then 3 monitoring well locations around the periphery of the park. Again, this site is located in the Oxnard Plain groundwater basin. There are multiple aquifer zones, an upper aquifer system and a lower aquifer system. This project and future projects are being proposed in the lower aquifer system. And as you can see right here, that's the upper Wainimi, and little distortion. Here's a location map of existing wells in the area. Off to the right, the blue dots are the city wells at Blending Station 1. Just south of the site is an irrigation well. The gray symbols up to the northwest are small domestic wells in the county area north of the airport, and then some other agricultural wells. This diagram shows the proposed design at the depth of the ASR well being in the upper Wainimi, while the location of all the existing local wells being in the Oxnard aquifer. So we not only have distance separating the existing facilities from the proposed well, we also have barriers between the aquifer layers that provide, if you would, isolation of this type of operation. Here's a diagram of the ASR well on the site and the 3 monitoring well locations with their radial distance indicated from the demonstration well. The dark blue in the center is a 30-day injection at 2,000 gallons a minute. The next is a 60, the lighter blue being 90, and then the whitish is a 6-month injection bubble. This is based on a porosity assumed for the thickness of the aquifer, and literally it's a volume calculation to fill up. We used a conservative 15% porosity. It may be more like 20. So as you can see here, we anticipate being able to see it hit the first nested monitoring well within a couple weeks, and then within a couple months, the second well, and likely not reaching the distance to the third monitoring well. This image shows an aerial view of the volume of aquifer that will be filled, again at a rate of 2,000 gallons a minute, and the 90-day recharge period is the dark circle in the middle, roughly 785 acre feet. The 6 month is the next travel time out, and then 2-year travel time if we were to inject consistently for a 2-year period. That's the distance it would be calculated from the injection point. At this location, which is in the center of these graphics, you can see that the groundwater gradient changes. The one on the right shows April 2011, when there was recharge in the forebay. Recharge pushing water to the southwest at the site about 30 feet above sea level. By August of 2014, the one on the left there shows that because of lack of recharge and demand from pumping, the gradient has changed from offshore direction to an onshore direction, and the water levels are approximately 15 to 18 feet below sea level. This makes it very difficult to do a conventional program where you recharge an area and then have wells down gradient to capture that water. So when we understood this dynamic, it was essential to try and capture the water because the quality is far better than any other supply they have. So the ASR concept was developed. Given these conditions and utilizing the projected 90-day recharge period, and then a 3-month, 90-day response retention time, we have estimated the travel of the recharge bubble of highly purified water, and under the conditions of recharge in the forebay, it's a steeper gradient. So the orange one that moves southwest is the furthest, and it only moved, I want to say, 250 to 300 feet. And then the slight yellow on the upper end is based on the gradient that was flowing northward under dry conditions. Obviously, it's a dynamic condition.
Over what time frame?
A 6-month period, a 180-day period.
Okay.
90 days of injection plus 90 days of residence time. So at the time we go to start pulling it back, we can see we're not going to be right in the middle of the bubble, and so we know there'll be mixing and some loss of quality due to native groundwater mixing with highly purified water. The suitability of this site provides for a considerable distance between the proposed project and existing wells that could potentially be impacted. The discrete aquifer zones isolate and preserve the high quality of water that we're putting in, as well as serve to limit any potential impacts to wells that are not completed in these zones. The city owns the only deep well in the area within that 1-mile radius, and so they have the ability to change the operation. The area is within the city itself, and therefore the area around it can be controlled in the terms of someone else wanting to put in a well. That can be prevented, so there's no potential impact for future users. As far as ASR, the central point of capture allows much higher recovery than to try and guess where the down gradient well will be and locate wells there. In addition, by having a central point of injection and extraction, we can develop a series of mitigation alternatives that, if necessary, can be implemented. And as well, at this site, because it's going to be a park in the future, there's plenty of room to expand and locate facilities where they won't interfere with each other, as well as when we back flush the wells and all, we expect that water will go into an on-site pond where they'll be using recycled water for irrigation at the park. Again, the project provides a number of benefits, including storage of water in the lower aquifer system, storage of a high-quality supply to benefit the aquifer and hopefully to be permitted as an indirect potable reuse for the city municipal supply. During injection and storage operations, it will elevate water levels in these zones, thereby assisting in recovering water levels that may be below sea level. It provides also the ability for potential aquifer management strategies with other wells that the city owns. In other words, by putting water in one place and pulling it out another, it could be a benefit to the management of the GMA. But in this case, we're proposing to pull the highly purified water directly back out of this facility. And then it allows control of the water that we put in. The water quality in the area, there was a well, within a couple hundred yards of the site on the other side of K Street, well number 13 for the city, destroyed back in the 80s, and it provided some background water quality data, and here we compared it to the AWPF purified water. Total dissolved solids, 970 on average in the groundwater, 85 coming out of the plant. And then you can see a comparison of other constituents. Another one of interest to me is the one on the bottom, sulfate, 0.81 coming out of the plant, less than 1 milligram per liter, 456 in the native background. What this allows us to do is utilize, if you would, intrinsic tracer values. The bottom of the graph on the right there shows concentrations of groundwater being 100% on the bottom axis. As we move up, the percentage of recycled water that is mixed with that groundwater will change the chemical character. And given that the one on the right is TDS, the blue line, the red line being sulfate, we think we'll be able to, in the monitoring wells, to see the change and thus verify our travel time calculations in the aquifer zone. The city has conducted other ASR operations like this and of comparable size. One was at blending station number 1, where they utilized state project water in the early 90s. And as you can see, on average, the 6-year average was approximately 1,800 acre-feet a year. This project was estimated at up to 1,500 acre-feet a year of injection and extraction through cyclical operation. The one on the graph on the right there, well 29 in 2010-2011, when the Cayuse pipeline crossing the freeway at the Del Norte Rice Avenue interchange, they had to move the line, and the system was shut down for a couple months, so we utilized an injection well at blending station 3 to store approximately 1,200 acre-feet of water. Here's the cumulative storage on the bars there. And we were injecting between 1,600 and 2,000 gallons a minute, again comparable to the project being proposed.
I can't read the bottom of that graph. Those
are dates. Starting in August of 2010, we injected all the way through February of 2011. And so as we injected...
They're not annual, they're maybe twice a year kind of injections, or?
No, this was continuous. What we were doing was
I don't mean continuous. I mean the dates, though. I mean, it's not every year.
What's the scale?
This is a 6 month.
Every 6 months.
Each line represents 6 months.
Okay, I think that's probably weekly. The scale being weekly on the vertical lines. But let me do this. Here's the recharge period. Began in August of 2010 and finished in February of 2011. Here is the water level in the ASR well, number 29, as well as an on-site monitoring well, so we could see the water level rise in that monitoring well. The injection period was, the well was shut off, and a storage period was observed while we were waiting for the pipeline to be taken out of service. And then the recovery period started to put the state quality water back into the system to maintain their obligation, mainly to Procter & Gamble. So this is a similar cycle to what we're talking about, but for a different purpose. Here we would do the recharge period, and the storage period would be to absorb a response retention time that would be required under the permit application. So I mentioned mitigation measures. If the plant had an upset or some issue at the treatment plant that it did not effectively treat the water and we're putting it into the ground, obviously we would stop injection immediately, determine what the potential problem was. If it is bacterial or viral or some kind of issue like that, that type of constituent will die off in the aquifer, so we could extend the response retention time and allow that in situ treatment to occur. If it's beyond that and leaving it in the aquifer isn't going to remedy that, then we would pump it back. And if it's unsuitable for a potable supply, we would put it right back in the recycle system and use it for irrigation. If indeed for some reason the quality of water can't be used for any beneficial use, we propose pumping it right into the sewer and letting them treat it again down at the plant. So the next steps in the ASR project we'll be back next month to receive final approval of the permit for the project from the GMA. We would construct the ASR well and conduct demonstration testing under the reported waste discharge requirements. And then based on the demonstration testing that we would provide the Department of Drinking Water, we would apply for indirect potable reuse. And to that extent, then, the city would need to connect the well field to their blending station 1, so that it would serve as another component of their municipal supply.
Okay. Anybody have questions?
I do not.
Anybody? Anybody in the audience have questions? Rob Saperstein has not been here in a long time. Rob's sitting over there. Nope. Okay. I know you do. But I had to acknowledge that you could come up, right? All righty. This, very good. The way this is listed for us, it's a receive and file. It's an informational item, and I thought, the presentation was fine. I don't understand all of it, but enough to know that you're doing what you're doing. It makes sense. So you had another comment?
If I may, I'm working with staff to finalize the monitoring and reporting. We just got another quarter's worth of data from the AWPF, and for the purpose of I think getting your approval. Staff wants to cross the I's, or dot the I's, cross the T's. And so, like I said, we'll be bringing that back for approval next month.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. We need a motion for a receive and file item, if there's no other questions or comments.
I'd just like to make one comment, and that is good luck. This is a source of new water for Oxnard, and that's good for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathleen, do I have to? Okay. Can I have a motion?
So.
And a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Jessica.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to item 6. Tully.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart. I'm Tully Clifford, the Assistant Executive Officer for the Fox County Groundwater Management Agency. The matter before you today is relatively simple. Staff is seeking approval from the board to assess surcharges on 2 agencies with groundwater extractions above an irrigation allowance index value of 1. I was going to have a big song and dance, but it's been fortunately reduced to somewhat of a hum. We've been working with both the agencies, the United Water Conservation District and Pleasant Valley County Water District, for several months, and are getting a lot closer to a resolution of this issue. The report indicates there was about 4,500 acre-feet of water unaccounted for. That's been substantially reduced, just over 500 acre-feet at this stage over the last few days. United, for example, held a mandatory meeting on April 18th to discuss the issue with their customers, and Pleasant Valley has been continuing their efforts to try and determine what was happening. But we impressed upon them for quite a while that the accuracy of the reporting really is the cornerstone of groundwater management here, and we really needed that information, and we advised both agencies we would be coming in front of the board today requesting the ability just to levy the surcharges if the action wasn't taken. And so they've both come a long way, but we're still nonetheless requesting authorization to be able to assess the surcharges for any IAIs over the 1.0 for those agencies if this isn't completely resolved by June 1st, 2016. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Tully? In the back, under conclusions, you have the approximate $1.6 million for PV and $3.4 million for United. I would assume with the reduction down and the process that GMA staff has been going through, that those numbers have gone down to? It's
substantially reduced. If I look, for example, at United at this stage, they only have about 150 acre-feet not accounted for, and so the different substantial difference, and so that number is quite a bit lower. I don't see it at a quick glance on my chart here. It'd probably be in the neighborhood, I would think, of that's right. The problem with being hard of hearing, I couldn't hear what was being whispered to me.
235.
235. There you go. Thank you. So it's substantially reduced.
All righty. And I assume PV, we did get a copy of a memorandum that was that lists all the growers. I know PV and United have been working on it. Mauricio is there. I think he wants to say some things on it. So let me hear from Mauricio, and Mauricio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. Mauricio Guardado, General Manager of United Water Conservation District. I was hoping my first encounter with this board would be actually perhaps a presentation of some water resource strategic planning, but here we are talking about surcharges. But first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Mandy Freitas very much for assisting staff in this process. We went from about 2,600 acre-feet of discrepancy down to some very low numbers. We have everything accounted for. There's about 52 acre-feet that's just non-responsive, and the other portion is the line loss. And my comment today is just requesting just point of clarification in the staff report. That sentence right above the conclusion, today's staff report, indicates, as we interpret, about a 5% allocation for line loss adjustment. And as we interpret it, it would appear that that 5% would be excluded from the variance and not subject to the surcharge, for various, things that occur with line loss. So, again, just looking for a point of clarification on
so
that.
Let me ask him right now.
Mm-hmm.
We feel that would be appropriate.
Okay, so does that take the 235 down to a different number?
I think it's all the same number, but
okay.
What we are mainly concerned with is that, in fact, the line loss would be included as not actually excluded from the variance, so that United wouldn't be subject to the surcharge for the line loss adjustment. And that answers my question.
Okay. For the board's benefit, I do know that Dan Nauman has worked both with PV and United. Dan, of course, being on the United board, that's his area, that's his district, and has worked with staff. Mandy has been great. PV has been responsive. This letter indicates all the work they have done. And I do know that a number of large growers have said we didn't even know there was a problem and immediately took care of the problem. So we're not getting the level of whining and complaining that one would expect when bills have to be paid. That process is taking care of itself. The problem we have, as has been explained to me by both Dan and Mauricio and staff, is that there are some growers that are no longer there, and they did take water. One of the problems I think we have, and I've said this to Mauricio and to the board, and we're working on new protocol, is that we cannot let ourselves get backed into this problem again. So we're looking at issues to deal with the protocol of how we deliver water, who gets that water, and how that bill is ultimately paid. One of the problems that United has, it does not have authority to go on people's property and take those readings as a backup. The GMA did not have that authority for a long time. We got it finally when the state passed it in our enabling legislation, and then really trumped it again when we got it as part of the GSA process. So the issue of accounting for water is instrumental. It's been a historic problem in the PV area and in the way we account for it, rather. In United, if you recall, a year or so, 2 years ago, United and staff went through a long process to figure out some other back history, and we finally dealt with how those credits were allocated before we put a kibosh on credits. So this is a new wrinkle in that process, and Mauricio and staff have committed to coming up with protocol to see if we can put a stop to this process. So I'm hopeful that we will have this resolved by the June timeframe, and at the rate in which they're pulling it down. It's kind of like a half-life. In the first big chunk, you can take half of it out. In the same time frame, you take half of it out. Now we're down to really some small numbers, and where are these people, and how do we account for it? So that's where we are in the process. So anybody else want to speak on this one? We have staff is making a recommendation to approve an assessment of surcharges on extraction greater than or equal to the water applied above IAI of 1.0 for both PV and United if reporting is not completed to the satisfaction of staff by June 1st, 2016. Can I have a motion on that one?
So moved.
A motion and a second. Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Jessica?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, item number 7.
Chair Mulhart, members of the board, Andrew Sheldon, staff groundwater manager, back now for item 7, groundwater sustainability plan update. I have a brief presentation for you on the progress we've been making in developing a groundwater sustainability plan for this agency. First, I'm going to start with background on the Department of Water Resources emergency regulation for the groundwater sustainability plans statewide. At the end of March, our agency staff submitted a comment letter in response to the draft regulations, and all of the comment letters that were submitted to the draft regulations put out by DWR were submitted back and considered in a presentation to the California Water Commission in May. And up on their website now you can see the DWR staff's proposed responses to the public comments on the draft regulations. Their plan now is to present revised draft regulations to the California Water Commission in May for adoption, and then forward those on to the Office of Administrative Law for final action in June. State requirements for the groundwater sustainability plans are evolving from the original SGMA legislation in the draft regulations that we saw, and we anticipate there will be further evolution in the final regulations that they adopt after considering the public comments they've received. Moving on to our communication plan, we continue to work on that here, working with the charter groups that have been formed by this board. And we're also planning a wider community outreach with workshops, community-wide workshops beginning in June. So to summarize, the charter groups are working well. They're meeting, continuing their work as key stakeholders in the agency community. And then for the wider community who aren't so directly involved in the sort of month-to-month meetings here and that kind of thing. We're going to have this community-wide outreach in June. The consultant that this agency hired to help write this groundwater sustainability plan for the agency began work in January and is progressing well on the project. Their first presentation to this board, I'm not sure if it's their first, but they will be presenting progress to this board in May. And they have been staying on track with the schedule set forth in our scope of work, but have requested that we consider making some adjustments so that they may better coordinate completion of key tasks with inputs from the technical advisory group and other stakeholders, in particular, some technical inputs on the water budget that were envisioned to flow into the process sooner are taking a little bit longer to be developed. And so they're asking for more time so that we don't have to sort of hit this milestone checkpoint and then move ahead with everything in place, that we have a longer time to work things out with all of the technical stakeholders. And likewise with sustainability objectives, that's a newer term that appeared in the draft regulations and defined things a little bit differently than how they'd been defined before, whereas the focus before had been on sustainable yield. Now, sustainable management is defined, taking into consideration some additional things. So these items are going to require the consultant to consider input from our whole community of stakeholders, and they're asking for a little bit more time to collect all that input. And since our workshops are starting in June, that would allow for that time. So recognizing that this is all moving along very quickly, staff and the technical advisory group and the consultant will be working together, looking carefully at all of the key uncertainties that go into the water budget and sustainability parameters and other critical items, and making sure that we give ourselves enough time to work these issues out so that everybody's in agreement as we move forward. Staff does see a benefit in working with the consultant to adjust the agreement schedule, scope, and deliverables so that we can better align stakeholders' input, and also to conform with the final format of the GSP regulations that we still don't have. We will have them, we expect, in their final form next month. So what we're recommending as next steps is potential modifications to the consulting agreement scope, schedule, and deliverables, and that we will bring back modifications for this board to hear in May or June. And our other next steps are we're going to be putting forth the workshops in June.
Okay.
That's my last slide. This is actually a received presentation item, so we're not actually looking for input. This is what we plan to do as our next steps.
Okay, very good. Anybody have any questions for Andrew?
I do.
Yes.
What kind of scope changes have been requested by the contractor or the consultant?
We have not gotten very specific on that at this time, but what it's been is that in recognition that there's modifications to, or anticipated modifications to the way the regulation formats the plan to be presented to them, they would like to have us consider that in their deliverables.
Independent of the regulations, it's my understanding that a lot of the data that the consultant assumed would be available is not available. Have they made any requests to changes in the scope to develop the data that they'll need to assess sustainability criteria, yields, or anything else?
That is not a request that's been made, but
where's that going to come from?
The way we see that happening right now is that as per the agreement that's in place, they will develop the water budget and other technical items based on other information sources that
They
were not
can't-
input.
They can't develop a water budget until someone tells them the size of the pie. Where is that data going to come from, since the assumed sources are not providing the data?
Yes, sir. We will be discussing that with them, but to date, they've not asked for that. It will be a dialogue with the technical advisory group, other stakeholders, the consultant and staff, to look at what are the key uncertainties, and I think you've hit on what what we know will be key uncertainties in this.
Has the consultant requested budget changes?
They have mentioned that they will be wanting to talk to us about that, but nothing specific has been requested, and we, at this time, are not asking for any, but we're going to be looking carefully at that.
Like in any project, certain regulations or entities that we report to have changed their criteria, not unlike when the county built the hospital. If they built the operating rooms to be 10 by 10, and then the state health department said, hey, we just passed a new rule that they have to be 20 by 20, that changes what goes into that hospital. The methodology for the hospital is a change order. So effectively what you're talking about is that there may be some change orders that need to come down to reflect some of the issues that stakeholders have raised, some of the issues that the consultants raised, some of the issues that even staff is now seeing. So potential modifications would be a change order to consulting agreement, schedule, scope, and deliverables, and may include a lot of these items that Director West just mentioned. So you're going to talk to us at the next meeting, either a May or June timeframe, and we'll probably have to deal with a change order of some scope, magnitude. And I assume it's going to cover the full gamut, from the deliverables to the schedule to the scope to the cost. It's part of the process of working our way through this. I mean, is that a fair summation of what I'm hearing?
Yes, I think so. We're providing monthly updates to this board on our progress on the project, and we're planning to come back in May. The reason I put or June here in the presentation is if there are big unanticipated changes in the regulation, we might want a little bit more time before we bring back something concrete to work on it, because they will not be considering that till late May. So we want to make sure that there's enough time in between the California Water Commission's action on the regulations and when our next meeting is here in May.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, we will be considering everything you said, Chairman.
So let's staff have that dialogue with all the stakeholders in the process. Let's make sure we're moving this thing along correctly. And what I don't want is we get to the final document and everybody comes out of the woodwork and shoots holes in it that should have been shot long before we got to the final document. And this is part of that process.
That's very much what we're trying to do. And trying to build some additional flexibility into the schedule is part of that, because some of this input is coming at later times than we originally anticipated, or not coming at all, as Mr. West pointed out. So we have to build some flexibility into this process so that we don't get so rigid that we trip over ourselves. We want to be inclusive of all stakeholder input. We want a product that is going to be accepted by the stakeholders, by the wide community, and by the agency that works for everybody. So that, yes, that is on the forefront of our minds as we work through this.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Steve?
Yes, I certainly appreciate the goal that we want this to be successful. We want the stakeholders to be on board. We want to be transparent, but we also need to have it work. We need to actually come up with a plan that meets the goals and all that. So quite frankly, I found this report here today fairly vague. Key uncertainties in the water budget. Tell me what uncertainties are. What what information is not forthcoming that we thought was forthcoming? Where did we think we were going to get it, and why were we wrong when we thought we were going to get that? Otherwise, all I'm getting is basically you say, hey, we want to let you know we're going to be asking for more time, and we'll probably be changing the scope of work somewhere down the road. That's not a for me, for us to do our due diligence, that is not very much due diligence. Now, I know it's early in the process. I know you don't want to do a lot of finger pointing, but at the same time, I need to know what are the key uncertainties, where are the potential problems, so that I, as a policyholder, can start to anticipate what the issue is. So, could you tell me the key uncertainties in the water budget that are not forthcoming, that we thought were going to be forthcoming? What is it? What data do we not have that we thought we were going to have?
So other partners in this process, United, Callegas, Camarosa, have been doing a lot of technical work on their own. And
for years. You're talking about for years they've been doing technical work.
Correct. And in the crafting of our agreement with the consultant, there were assumptions that a lot of this information was going to be readily assimilated into the water budget. And it's turned out that it's taking additional time.
What's taking additional time? They don't have it, or they don't want to provide it?
I don't have an answer for that because I don't know.
Right, so
what I do know is the consultant is saying that they're not receiving the data in a timely way.
Sure.
And I do.
But we can't begin to solve that problem without a little bit. We need to know, does the data exist and they're not providing it, or do they not have the data and we made an error in thinking that they did?
Chair Mulhart, I think that I can respond partially to that question. One of the matters that we're looking at is who has what information and what type of a format is that information. How did they derive the water budget that they've been using for years? And I think part of our issue is we have a disconnect of how the water budgets were put together. So one of the issues where we will be discussing at this week's technical advisory group is how do we solve those differences? And so we can't specifically say what they are on a basin by basin basis at this time, but we will know that after Friday. We will know if we're having a terminology issue relative to the emergency regulations, or if in fact we're having a technical disconnect. So we will have that information on this Friday. And when we come back to the board with a recommendation for a change in the scope and the deliverables and the schedule, we will clearly articulate what that is and why that is. And if we are having an issue with a particular entity organization, we will also identify that and work directly with them. We just want to make sure that we have consistency with the emergency regulations. At this stage, it feels to me a little bit like guesswork to make sure, because we've changed from sustainable yield terminology to critical parameters and minimum thresholds and all. So we have to get all of that organized, get it together, determine, okay, what is it we're missing? And we will come back to the board and say, here's what the difficulties are, here's why we're requiring those changes. So we will come back. So yes, I actually directed Andrew to be somewhat vague in this particular item because we didn't have the specifics. So we wanted to say we have concerns, but we couldn't articulate clearly what those are, but we'll certainly have a better idea after Friday.
So you'll have more specifics in future reports.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is the second thing I would just like to say is that, you know, I know we have tight, you know, time frames. We want to try to make sure we move, and yet these things always sort of start slow, and that's, you know, because it takes a while to pull everybody together, et cetera. But there is a certain narcotic aspect to asking for more time. You know, hey, we need more time, we need more time. And, you know, you can get to the point where, well, I can work really hard and get this done, or we could ask for more time. And I just want to make sure that we should be granting more time judiciously, you know, or else this thing will just keep falling. And what will really fall are the hard decisions. We'll come close to a hard decision and we'll say, we need more time. And that is the one thing I think we all committed to. We said that is the error, that's the risk factor out there. So I'm okay, at the beginning part of the process, pulling it together, but I want to at least raise a red flag that these requests for more time should be ones that are carefully considered, and we don't just become addicted to kicking that down the road. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think one of the messages, and I'm glad you spoke up about some of the issues. Well, before I say anything, I see some people have arrived. Brian, you want to go first?
Good afternoon, Chair Malhart, Directors Brian Bondi, Cayugas. I just, for the record, want to make it clear that we have provided a tremendous amount of information. When this process was first established for TAG, staff set up something called a SharePoint site. It's an online system where we can post electronic documents. I spent 2 days uploading all reports that I had in my possession. I even went out on the internet and found reports that I didn't have and uploaded those, as well as work that I've done personally for the Las Postas Users Group. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that at least for Cayugas and the Las Postas Basin, we have bent over backwards to provide the data and information that's necessary for this process to move forward. And from Cayugas' perspective, we need this process to move forward and be successful. We need a basin that is managed so that we can store imported water for emergencies that will happen someday on our imported water supply system. We need this to work. We are committed. We are here to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian, can I just ask you a question? I appreciate your comments about being willing to be forthcoming. You used a term, you said, we've provided all the information that is needed for this process to go forward. Is it your position that all the information that is needed has been presented, or is it your position that you provided all the information that you have that may or may not be all the information that's needed, but you're certainly willing to provide all the information you have? Is the latter the more accurate
That's
statement?
an important distinction. We've provided the information that's available that is needed to do the analysis. Now, there may be questions about whether there is sufficient information to take a particular analysis to an endpoint. That's a different conversation, but we've provided what we have.
But you weren't disagreeing. It's not a disagreement where you're saying, hey, that's all you need, and somebody else is saying that. It's more you're saying, we've given you all we have, and we still have to have a conversation about whether that's enough.
Right.
Great.
Given you all we have, let's get started. Another point I'd like to make that I think now I'm going to switch hats and talk as Director Borchard's representative on TAG. I believe that there's a misunderstanding to some extent in the role of TAG. If you go back and look at the staff report that you all approved when you formed TAG, and you look on the second or third page, there's a list of about 10 activities that you envision TAG doing. 9 of the 10, the action verb that starts with is review. Review, advise. Somewhere along the way, people developed an assumption the TAG was going to be doing actual heavy lifting, data analysis, and work. That's different than reviewing and analyze. And when we're at the TAG meetings, we hear frequently statements about, we made an assumption the TAG was going to do this work, or TAG was going to provide this analysis, or this number, or this answer. That is very different than being asked to review the work of the consultant and advise your board on that result. And I think my sense is that disconnect between the reviewing role and the doing role is part of the problem, because it sounds like there are assumptions that have been made that TAG would be doing things the consultant doesn't have in its scope. And I think part of solving this problem is to go back and revisit the role of TAG and make sure that everybody is clear on that, so we're all working in the same direction with the same understanding. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Tony.
Good afternoon, Chair, Directors. I'm Tony Morgan, Deputy GM for United Water for Groundwater and Water Resources, also your Vice Chair on your TAG. I just want to reiterate, and I won't repeat a lot of Brian's comments because they're certainly applicable to United's efforts. We've had multiple meetings with the consultants. They've been in our office for hours looking over data and looking at information that we have. We've had multiple conversations with them on the phone, talking about technical approaches and that kind of thing. The message I wanted to leave you with is everybody's in the boat, the oars are in the water, and we're stroking. We're moving forward. We're making progress. It may not be as rapidly as we had all hoped it would be when we first got going on this process, but we're making progress and everybody's working hard. So there's no feeling on, I don't think, the TAG's part or staff's part, if I can speak for them for the moment, that people are slacking off and not keeping their head to the grindstone and trying to make progress and figure out the proper path forward for getting this GSP formulated. So that's my points for this afternoon. Thank you.
Helpful to hear from both of you on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tony, do you want to speak? Yeah.
Tony Stafford, General Manager for Camarosa Water District, and Camarosa was mentioned also, and I want to make it clear that we have provided the information that we have. We've also dedicated staff time to creating and manipulating data to be in a format that this process could use, and so it's not that we haven't given the information that we have, and I don't want that taken away from here.
Okay. Terry?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to echo everybody's comments, but also add that there is a lot of complications in terms of the analysis that needs to be done. It's not as straightforward, identify a formula, plug in some parameters, and come out with a number, because there's a lot of choices on formulas. There's a lot of choices on the numbers. And in TAG, we're actually just getting into that discussion about how to do a water budget, what goes into the water budget. As Brian said, a lot of information has been provided, a lot of data has been provided, but there's analysis that needs to be done. And the consultant has basically said they, in their assumption and their scope of work, and it's right there, it's in black and white, you can read it, they do not plan to do any new analysis. And so partly there's a fatal flaw in that assumption, and that the idea was they would use existing analysis. The only real existing analysis that's out there and available in the public is the model that was developed for the original groundwater management plan. No one's basically bought into that plan as being, or model and data being available or acceptable today. So some reanalysis is going to have to be done. In TAG, we're talking about what that reanalysis may look like, and we're going to have that discussion on Friday further. And so I think that's probably the challenge of staff, having to give you uncertainties and what that means, because we are still having those conversations. And that takes time to do. So I would just ask that if you could give staff a little relief on the schedule, because all of our meetings end up being driven by, well, the board wants this done within a year. And I understand that, and I appreciate the interest in getting this done and not letting your foot off the gas pedal. But at the same time, we're moving ahead with a scope of work, doing work that may either be thrown away or have to be redone or may not be accepted. And I don't think that's really a good idea. They're running down the road, pulling together this water budget when we haven't agreed on what the water budget analysis should be, what the methodology is. So I would just respectively request that you give staff a little more latitude and come back with you. We're working hard to try to get this done. Nobody's slacking, I can assure you that. But I would like them to have some flexibility in moving forward, that, hey, this doesn't make sense. Maybe we can have extra TAG meetings or call a special board meeting and whatever we need to do to make sure we're doing it right, as opposed to just fast. And I think Jeff told you when we started this process, we can do it fast, we can do quality, or we can do it cheap, pick two of the three. I think now you're down to one. We're basically doing it fast, and that's just not going to be a good product. So I would ask that they be given a little more flexibility to work with TAG, work with stakeholders, and I have an even greater fear as we move forward that we're going to be talking about these critical parameters that Tully mentioned, and some of these specific sustainability issues, the undesirable results, that right now the plan is to largely rely on TAG and staff to define what undesirable is. Well, you spent 2 board meetings talking about it, kicking it back to TAG. So I think there's going to be more need for input of the stakeholders to help us define, I can do the analysis, I can say the well's going to draw down to this level, but is that significant? Is that adverse? We're going to need stakeholder input to really kind of flesh that out, and it's going to take multiple iterative sessions to do that, and right now, the way it's described is there are no iterative sessions. We're going to discuss it, it's going to come out to the public, and that's it. That's the way it's described right now. So I just want you to understand the time issue is driving some of the technical work, and I'm afraid that unless they're given some relief, that it's just not going to be acceptable to anyone. So I would hope that you would consider that and give that some consideration for the staff.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Anybody else? If you go back up here on the chart that Andrew went through and comments that I heard up here, they're talking about staff sees a benefit in adjusting consulting agreement schedule, scope, deliverables. Those are three areas. It may be broader than that. I'm not hearing any pushback right now from stakeholders or board members that no, we cannot do any of those adjustments. I'm not hearing that. We've heard one comment from Steve that says we need to make sure we effectively justify what we're doing is the right move and we're not delaying just because we're not willing to make a tough decision. And I think that's a summary statement. So my comment would be is that we've already put in play and everybody understands, staff understands, TAG group understands, the consultant understands that there's uncertainties and we may have to make some adjustments. What I would direct staff to do, and I direct the consultants to do, is to have that discussion. So when we come back in May and staff makes recommendations, we've ironed out why specifically we need to adjust a schedule, a scope, deliverables, and all the other things that go with that so that we meet Terry's comments, and I think you're correct. You've got to give us something. It's what Steve said. If you don't give us what the parameters are for the problem, we can't do our job. And our job in this whole thing, I think when we set it up, is we're going to set these groups up. When these groups have their individual problems and they hit a roadblock or some kind of fork in the road and they're not quite sure which way to go, the answer is you got to get it back to the board so we can go through the public process and re-give directions. We're at one of those points right now, as I see it. Everybody's admitted, based on what I'm seeing on the board, we're at that point. We heard it from the folks that are in the TAG. We've heard it from staff. So take the time at that TAG meeting and let's sort out some of these issues that are specific recommendations to keep this ball going down the road, do the quality work that we need to do, and what we need to change in a change order, which happens in all kinds of constructions. This is how construction goes. I see it in the same range, so that we have an honest discussion at the May board meeting so that Andrew and staff have direction and TAG feels like they're on board with that so that we're not at this point in time trying to point fingers. Let's get away from that. Give us the parameters and the solution so we can have that debate. Everybody okay with that as direction? Anybody opposed to that? Dave?
Fine, perfectly okay with it. I just would remind the board that when we first kind of set this thing in motion, and I had real concerns about the time frame, we had said that if it needed to be so, we would back off on the gas a little bit to make sure we did the job right, not just fast.
So
I think that's important.
Okay, so let's have the reasons for it. Let's make sure it's correct, and all the other ancillary things. If in fact, out of that process, you want to have more workshops, less workshops, more special board meetings, we've committed the board would have an additional day allocated each month for a special board meeting on specific issues that need to be addressed to keep the ball going. We've now canceled 2 of those in a row because no one said it's worth having that. It may be that we need to start using those. We've blocked it into the process. So to the public, to the board, to all of us, we got a whole bunch of tools in our toolbox to get this done right. I think everybody wants it done right. I'm pleased people are bringing these issues to the board. Let's sort it out, use the time appropriately, and bring us back a proposed solution and the justifications for it, and we'll make our decisions based on that. Okay? Everybody okay with that? All right. That is a receive and status update, and you got direction. Do we need a motion or anything on that, Al? Are we okay with that?
No motion required.
Okay. We're down to executive officer report. Any specific item on that? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion. Second? Second. Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing no objection, it's approved, and we are adjourned to the next board meeting Wednesday, May 25th. Right side?
Special meeting.
Oh, that's right. We do have a special meeting coming up in May.
May 13th.
May 5th.
13th.
13th. So May 13th, special board meeting. All right, there we go. Thank you.